At 0530 hours on December 21st, 1944, Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe stood in the frozen basement command post in Bastogne, Belgium, watching German panzer tanks position themselves for an assault that would determine whether surrounded forces survived the next 48 hours. McAuliffe commanded all Allied forces in Bastogne. The 101st Airborne Division, combat command via the 10th Armored Division, tank destroyer battalions, artillery battalions, scattered engineer units, stragglers from shattered divisions. Approximately 18,000 men, surrounded by 3 German divisions. He was 46 years old, from Washington District of Columbia, a West Point graduate who finished in November 1918. He served as a division artillery commander, not the division commander. The actual commander, Major General Maxwell Taylor, was in Washington attending conferences. Command had fallen to McAuliffe by default. The Germans had surrounded the town completely that morning, cutting all 7 highways. McAuliffe's forces were outnumbered 5-1, low on ammunition, no winter clothing for most men, temperatures dropping to minus 15 degrees Celsius, and the nearest Allied reinforcements were 60 kilometers away, fighting through German lines to reach them. The German Panzer Divisions, 2nd Panzer, Panzer Lehr, and 26th Volksgrenadier Division were closing the ring. Their mission was to capture Bastogne Road Junction and push west to the Meuse River and Antwerp, Hitler's last desperate offensive in the West. Everything depended on speed, on seizing those crossroads before American reinforcements arrived. But here's what the Germans didn't understand. What they thought was a trap was actually the worst tactical mistake of their entire offensive. By surrounding Bastogne instead of bypassing it, they were about to concentrate their armor into a killing zone that would cost them the equivalent of 5 divisions and any chance of reaching their objective. McAuliffe knew this because 2 days earlier on December 19th, he explained to his regimental commanders exactly why getting surrounded at Bastogne would destroy the German offensive. And what happened in the next 8 days would prove McAuliffe right, would destroy Germany's last armor reserve in the West, and would turn apparent disaster into one of the most decisive American victories of World War II. The first American unit destroyed by the German offensive was the 106th Infantry Division on December 17, 1944. McAuliffe received reports about their collapse while he was still moving north from France. The 106th had been holding the Schnee Eifel, a ridge along the German border. Green Division, newly arrived, positioned in the quiet Ardennes sector for seasoning. On December 16th at 0530, the Germans hit them with 90 minutes of artillery from 1,600 guns. Then came the tanks. 3 German armies, 24 divisions, over 400,000 men, smashed through an 80-kilometer front held by 4 tired American divisions. The 106 got surrounded, cut off, overrun. Approximately 8,000 Americans surrendered, the largest mass surrender of United States forces in Europe during the entire war. McAuliffe had served with some of those officers at previous posts. He knew their capabilities, knew they were good soldiers. On December 17th, 8th Corps headquarters monitored their final radio transmissions, desperate calls for ammunition, for air support, for any kind of help, then static silence. The official reports later said the division fought well, considering the circumstances, that they delayed the German advance, that their sacrifice bought time. McAuliffe knew that was partly true, but the real problem was that they'd been in the wrong place fighting the wrong battle. Spread out defending a line, they got crushed piecemeal by concentrated German armor. The second disaster was at Clairvaux on December 17th. The 28th Infantry Division, holding the town, got hit by the 2nd Panzer Division, 120 tanks, 16,000 men. The 28th fought building to building for 2 days, lost 700 men. The town fell on December 18th. The road to Bastogne opened. By December 19th, McAuliffe had watched 2 American divisions get destroyed from his position at Camp Mormelon in France, had seen intelligence reports showing the German breakthrough rolling west, apparently unstoppable. Every tactical principle said you don't let yourself get surrounded. You maintain freedom of movement. You keep your supply lines open. You avoid getting fixed in place where the enemy can mass forces against you. Getting encircled meant getting destroyed. Everyone in the Army knew that. And yet on December 18th at 0300 hours, the 101st Airborne Division loaded onto trucks at Camp Mormillon and drove north toward Bastogne with orders to hold the crossroads town at all costs. No winter gear, insufficient ammunition, no clear intelligence on enemy strength. Most of the division's senior leadership was elsewhere. Major General Maxwell Taylor, the division commander, was in Washington attending staff conferences. Brigadier General Gerald Higgins was in England. Command fell to McAuliffe, the division artillery commander, a 46-year-old artilleryman with zero infantry command experience at division level. McAuliffe arrived in Bastogne on December 19th at 0900 hours and met with Major General Troy Middleton, 8th Corps commander, whose headquarters was being evacuated south as the Germans closed in. The meeting was brief, almost hurried. Middleton's staff was burning documents, loading trucks, preparing to withdraw. The sound of artillery fire was getting closer. German armor was reported 10 kilometers away and moving fast. Middleton told McAuliffe the situation was desperate. 3 German divisions, maybe 4, were converging on Bastogne from multiple directions. American units were scattered across the countryside, some units destroyed, some retreating in disorder, some still holding but isolated. The road network was collapsing. Within hours, maybe a day at most, Bastogne would be completely surrounded. Middleton had already sent what forces he had available to delay the Germans. Combat Command B of the 10th Armored Division under Colonel William Roberts had arrived the day before and been split into 3 task forces. Team de Saubry under Major William de Saubry sent north of the village of Neuville to block the 2nd Panzer Division. Team Cherry under Lieutenant Colonel Henry Cherry sent east toward Longville to slow Panzer Lehr. Team O'Hara under Lieutenant Colonel James O'Hara sent southeast to cover another approach. These weren't large forces. Each task force had maybe 400 men, a dozen tanks, some tank destroyers, but they were all Middleton had. The 10th Armored Teams bought critical time. At Neuville on December 19th and 20th, Team de Saubry, reinforced by elements of the 501st Parachute Infantry Regiment, held off the entire 2nd Panzer Division for 36 hours. The fighting was brutal. Close-range tank battles in fog and snow. American tank destroyers, M18 Hellcats from the 705th Tank Destroyer Battalion, destroyed over 30 German tanks. The Germans finally forced the Americans to withdraw, but the delay cost the 2nd Panzer 2 full days and heavy casualties. By the time they cleared Neuville, the 101st Airborne had established defensive positions around Bastogne. Team Cherry at Longville got surrounded and largely destroyed, but not before causing more delays and destroying several German vehicles. Team O'Hara at Warden fought from December 19th through December 22nd, conducting a fighting withdrawal that further slowed German advances. These small unit actions, desperate defensive stands by outnumbered forces, bought the hours that McAuliffe needed to position the 101st. Middleton needed the 101st to hold Bastogne long enough for other forces to organize a counterattack. McAuliffe asked how long he needed to hold. Middleton said he didn't know. Maybe 3 days, maybe a week, maybe until they all died. McAuliffe said they'd hold. Then Middleton said something that McAuliffe would remember clearly decades later. Middleton said, "Don't worry about getting surrounded. If they surround you, you'll have them right where you want them." At the time, McAuliffe thought that was command optimism, the kind of thing officers say to keep morale up. But 3 hours later, after surveying the terrain and studying the road network, McAuliffe realized Middleton was absolutely right. Getting surrounded at Bastogne wasn't disaster. It was opportunity. December 19th, 1400 hours. McAuliffe gathered his regimental commanders in a basement in Bastogne. Lieutenant Colonel Julian Ewell, commanding the 501st Parachute Infantry Regiment, Lieutenant Colonel Steve Chaput is commanding the 502nd, Colonel Robert Sink commanding the 506th, Colonel Joseph Harper commanding the 327th Glider Infantry, plus Colonel William Roberts from 10th Armored, the artillery commanders, the staff officers. The room was crowded, cold, lit by one bare bulb. McAuliffe spread a map on the table. Bastogne sat at the center, where 7 roads converged. Everything in the Ardennes Road network ran through this town, north to south, east to west. You couldn't move large mechanized forces without using Bastogne's roads. McAuliffe pointed at the map and explained what was about to happen and why it would work in American favor. The Germans need these roads more than we do. Their entire offensive depends on speed. They have maybe 4 days to reach the Meuse River before we can bring enough forces to stop them. 4 days to cover 80 kilometers through terrible terrain in winter. They can't do it cross-country with armor. They need the roads. All the roads run through here. Right now, McAuliffe continued, the German Panzer Divisions are racing west trying to bypass us. 2nd Panzer Division to the north. Panzer Lehr to the south. They want to leave us behind. Let the infantry divisions deal with us later. But they can't because every ton of supplies, every liter of fuel, every ammunition truck for their spearhead divisions has to come through this road network. And we're sitting on it. When they surround us, they're not trapping us. They're committing forces to hold us in place. Forces that should be racing west. Every tank they put around our perimeter is a tank that's not reaching the Meuse. Every artillery battery they position to attack us is artillery that's not supporting their advance. And once they commit those forces, they can't easily pull them back because we're behind their lines causing problems. More importantly, when they surround us, they concentrate their forces into a fixed position around a known objective, our objective. They'll be attacking the same targets repeatedly from the same directions. We know where they'll come from because we control the town, and they have to come down the roads to reach us. They're mechanized. They need the roads. We can prepare defensive positions, prearrange our artillery, position our anti-tank weapons exactly where we need them. And when they attack, they'll be attacking into prepared defenses from predictable directions with their supply lines stretched behind them, running back through terrain we can harass with patrols. They'll have to protect their flanks, guard their rear, defend their supply routes. Meanwhile, once our reinforcements break through, we're already positioned in the perfect place, right in their rear, cutting their supply lines permanently. Lieutenant Colonel Ewell asked, "What happens if the reinforcements don't break through?" McAuliffe said, "Then we all die, but the Germans won't reach the Meuse either, because they'll have wasted too much time and too much combat power trying to take this town. Either way, the offensive fails. The question is whether we survive to see it." The briefing ended. The officers left to position their units. McAuliffe understood the plan intellectually, but emotionally it still felt wrong. Getting surrounded felt like disaster. But Middleton had made one point McAuliffe couldn't argue with. In 2 days, he'd watched 2 American divisions get destroyed, fighting the wrong way, spread out trying to defend everything. They defended nothing. The 106 got overrun because they couldn't concentrate their forces. The 28 got crushed because they tried to hold towns that didn't matter strategically. Bastogne mattered. And defending one town with concentrated forces was better than defending 100 kilometers of line with scattered units that couldn't support each other. December 20th, noon. The Germans closed the ring. All 7 highways cut. Bastogne completely surrounded. The perimeter wasn't circular, wasn't neat. It followed terrain, used villages as strong points, covered about 26 kilometers of defensive positions, manned by approximately 18,000 American troops. Counting the 101st, the attached armor and tank destroyer units, the artillery, the stragglers, and support troops Colonel Roberts had organized into Team Snafu. The defensive scheme worked because McAuliffe understood what the Germans would do. They'd probe for weak spots, find one, concentrate forces, try to break through to the center of town. But the American defense wasn't trying to hold every meter of ground. It was designed to absorb attacks, channel them into kill zones, destroy them with firepower. Ground could be given up temporarily as long as the defense maintained coherence and the artillery kept firing. The 501st Parachute Infantry, under Lieutenant Colonel Ewell, held the eastern perimeter from the railroad near Luzery southeast to Marvey. The 506th, under Colonel Sink, held from the railroad northeast to Foy. The 502nd, under Lieutenant Colonel Chapuis, covered the northwestern sector from Foy to Hemrule. The 327th Glider Infantry, under Colonel Harper, had the longest, thinnest line running from the 502nd left flank all the way around south to Marvey. Behind all of them, positioned centrally, 3 battalions of 155mm howitzers commanded by Colonel Thomas Sherburne. The artillery could fire in any direction, had pre-registered concentrations on every likely German avenue of approach. When infantry commanders called for fire, the shells arrived in minutes, landing exactly where needed. The Mobile Reserve, about 40 tanks from Combat Command B of the 10th Armored, survivors from the teams that had delayed the Germans, now regrouped in positions centrally where they could respond to any breakthrough. The first German probe came at 1,500 hours on December 20th. A company of infantry from the 26th Volksgrenadier Division advancing up the road from the south toward positions held by the 327th Glider Infantry. The Americans let them approach to 200 meters, then opened fire, machine guns, rifles, mortars. The attack broke in 8 minutes. The Germans pulled back, leaving 32 bodies on the road. American casualties from that engagement: 3 men wounded, 1 seriously. They'd stopped a German company with 3 casualties because the Germans had come straight up the road into prepared positions. McAuliffe, monitoring the radio traffic from his command post, started to see what Middleton meant. The second attack came at 1,730 hours, heavier. 2 companies with tank support, 6 Mark V Panzers advancing on the 501st sector near Neff. They made it to 150 meters before American anti-tank guns, M18 Hellcats from the 705th Tank Destroyer Battalion, opened fire. 3 tanks destroyed in 90 seconds. The others pulled back. The infantry retreated. American casualties: 5 wounded, 1 Hellcat damaged. German casualties: estimated 80 killed. 3 tanks destroyed. The attack completely stopped. And the Germans hadn't learned anything useful about American positions because they'd all died or run before they could report back. Tomorrow, they'd likely come to the same place the same way, and the Americans would be ready again. By December 21st, McAuliffe realized the defense of Bastogne wasn't about holding ground. It was about destroying German units faster than they could be replaced. Every failed attack cost the Germans men and equipment they couldn't afford to lose. Every hour they spent attacking Bastogne was an hour their spearhead divisions weren't advancing west. The Germans were bleeding themselves against fixed defenses while accomplishing nothing. The real problem was supplies. Bastogne had been a supply depot, but most of the stocks had been evacuated south before the Germans surrounded the town. The 101st arrived with minimal ammunition, almost no medical supplies, limited food. By December 21st, ammunition was rationed. Artillery was limited to 10 rounds per gun per day. Automatic weapons were restricted to short-aim bursts. Every shot had to count because there weren't many shots left. Food was worse. The division had brought approximately 2 days of K rations. By December 21st, the men were on half rations. By December 22nd, quarter rations. Temperatures stayed below freezing. Men were hungry, cold, exhausted. Most didn't have winter uniforms. They wore every piece of clothing they could scavenge from abandoned positions, from casualties, from civilians who had fled the town. Medical supplies were nearly gone. The division's main medical company had been captured on December 19th, when a German patrol overran the division service area south of Bastogne. Most of the surgeons, most of the medical equipment, most of the morphine, all captured. The division aid stations were operating with whatever they grabbed before leaving Camp Mormillon. Not enough. Wounded men died from treatable injuries because there weren't enough medical supplies to treat them properly. On December 22nd at 1,100 hours, 4 German officers approached the American lines under a white flag near the 327th Glider Infantry sector. They carried a message from General der Panzertruppen Heinrich Freiherr von Luttwitz, commanding 47th Panzer Corps. The message demanded surrender. It said the American forces were surrounded, outnumbered, cut off from supply. Honorable surrender was the only way to avoid total annihilation. The message gave 2 hours for response. The German message was brought to McAuliffe's command post. He read it, looked at his staff, and said one word: nuts. His operations officer, Lieutenant Colonel Harry Kinnard, asked what he meant. McAuliffe said, "I mean nuts." That's my response. Tell them to go to hell. We're not surrendering. Someone asked if he was serious. McAuliffe said, absolutely. The written response went back to the German officers, to the German commander. Nuts. The American commander. The German officers asked what it meant. Colonel Harper, who escorted them back to German lines, told them it means go to hell. The Americans aren't giving up. Von Luttwitz was not amused. He'd offered honorable terms, expected a serious response. The refusal meant the Germans would have to take Bastogne by force, which meant committing even more resources to the siege. Von Luttwitz pulled the 2nd Panzer Division back from the western advance and ordered it to help capture Bastogne. He pulled elements of Panzer Lehr back. He reinforced the 26th Volksgrenadier Division. By December 23rd, the Germans had concentrated 3 full divisions around Bastogne, exactly what McAuliffe wanted. 3 German divisions that should have been racing toward the Meuse were instead sitting outside Bastogne, preparing attacks that would fail. December 23rd, 800 hours. The weather cleared. For the first time in a week, the sky was blue. McAuliffe looked up from his command post entrance and saw what every soldier in Bastogne had been waiting for. Aircraft. American aircraft. C-47s. Dozens of them flying low the perimeter, dropping supply bundles by parachute. The bundles fell across the defensive perimeter. Ammunition, medical supplies, food, plasma. The resupply operation was massive. 241C, 47 aircraft participated in the first drop. They delivered approximately 144 tons of supplies. Ammunition cases, medical bundles marked with red crosses, food containers, plasma packages, all floating down on parachutes of different colors coated by contents. Not everything landed inside the perimeter. Some bundles drifted into German lines. German soldiers watched American supplies fall from the sky, knowing that every bundle that landed meant the Americans in Bastogne could fight longer. Some German units tried to shoot down the transport aircraft. American fighter escorts drove them off. The artillery received enough shells to increase their daily allocation from 10 rounds per gun to 40. Infantry units received ammunition resupply, approximately 50 rounds per rifleman, belt after belt for machine guns. Medical stations received plasma and morphine, surgical supplies, bandages. The resupply changed everything tactically and psychologically. Men who had been conserving every round suddenly had ammunition to fight with. Wounded men who might have died from shock received plasma. The garrison went from being on the edge of collapse to being combat capable again in one afternoon. Then came the fighter bombers. 47 Thunderbolts flying close support missions attacking German positions around the perimeter. The Panzers that had been painted green and brown for summer operations stood out clearly against the snow. The P-47s dove in streams, dropping bombs, firing rockets, strafing with 50 caliber machine guns. McAuliffe watched from an observation post as 6 tanks burned in 20 minutes. The Germans tried to pull their armor back, but the narrow roads through the forest made maneuvering difficult. More tanks destroyed, more vehicles burning, more German infantry caught in the open by strafing runs. By afternoon of December 23rd, the German attacks had stopped, not because they'd given up, but because operating in daylight under American air superiority was suicide. They'd have to wait for darkness, attack at night when the aircraft couldn't see them. But night attacks are harder, require better coordination, achieve less surprise against defenders who know they're coming. The air support changed the psychological dynamic completely. McAuliffe's men had spent 4 days surrounded, outnumbered, wondering if anyone was coming to help. The aircraft proved someone was coming. The airdrops proved they weren't forgotten. The fighter-bombers proved the Germans didn't own the battlefield anymore. German morale went the opposite direction. They'd been attacking prepared defenses for 4 days, losing men and equipment, making no progress. Now, they couldn't even operate in daylight. December 25th, 300 hours, Christmas morning, the Germans launched their main assault on the western perimeter. The 15th Panzer Grenadier Division just arrived from Germany, supported by elements of the 26th Volksgrenadier Division. The attack came out of darkness, aimed at the villages of Champs and Hemmerl, trying to break through to the center of Bastogne. The German infantry hit the 327th Glider Infantry at 0330, approximately 2 regiments, maybe 4,000 men with tank support. The attack achieved initial surprise, penetrated the American line, got German tanks into Hemmerl. McAuliffe, awakened by the sound of firing, rushed to his operations center and began coordinating the defense. The American response tore apart the German attack systematically. The penetration exposed the German tanks to fire from multiple directions. American tank destroyers positioned in depth engaged from the flanks. Artillery pre-registered on the approach routes dropped concentrations that broke up the following infantry. The German advance stopped 600 meters inside the perimeter. The tanks couldn't push forward without infantry support. The infantry couldn't advance through the artillery fire. At 0800, McAuliffe ordered counterattacks from adjacent units. Room-to-room fighting in Hemmerl. Grenades through windows, close-range firefights in the streets. By noon, the Germans were pulling back. All the tanks that had penetrated were destroyed or abandoned. The infantry retreated to their start lines. American casualties, approximately 300 men. German casualties, estimated 1,500, plus 18 tanks destroyed. The Christmas attack was the Germans' best chance to take Bastogne. They'd thrown everything available at one section of line, achieved surprise, penetrated defenses, and it hadn't worked. The concentrated American defense, the pre-planned artillery fires, the defense in depth, all of it worked exactly as McAuliffe planned. The Germans attacked into a kill zone and got destroyed. December 26, 1650 hours. Lieutenant Charles Boggess, commanding a tank platoon with the 37th Tank Battalion, 4th Armored Division, crashed through the German line south of Bastogne, near the village of Assenois, and made contact with American engineers of the 326th Airborne Engineer Battalion. McAuliffe, informed by radio, rushed forward to meet the relief column. The siege was over. The road opened. Supplies poured in. Wounded were evacuated. The Germans pulled back from the immediate perimeter, but didn't abandon the siege completely. They still held positions around Bastogne, still controlled the surrounding terrain. The encirclement was broken, but the battle wasn't over. Fighting would continue for another 3 weeks. What the Germans didn't realize was that they'd already lost not just the battle for Bastogne, but the entire offensive. By concentrating forces against Bastogne for 8 days, they destroyed their own timetable. The spearhead divisions never reached the Meuse. They ran out of fuel, out of time, out of momentum. The German perspective reveals how completely the Battle of Bastogne broke their offensive. Lieutenant General Heinrich von Luttwitz commanded 47th Panzer Corps responsible for taking Bastogne. 59-year-old veteran commander experienced in armored operations from 4 years of war on multiple fronts. His forces included 3 divisions: 2nd Panzer under Colonel Meinrad von Lauchert, Panzer Lehr under General Lieutenant Fritz Bayerlein, 26th Volksgrenadier under General Major Heinz Kokott. Elite units well equipped by German standards at that point in the war, experienced. On December 17th, von Lüttwitz was confident. The initial breakthrough had succeeded beyond expectations. The American 8th Corps was shattered. The 106th Infantry Division surrendered. The 28th Infantry Division was scattered. American forces were falling back in disorder. The roads west looked open. Intelligence reported American reserves were scattered, would take days to concentrate. The road to the Meuse looked clear. Von Lüttwitz's original orders for Bastogne were simple. Take it by surprise if possible, bypass if necessary, but don't get bogged down. The main objective was the Meuse River at Dinant, 80 kilometers west. Speed was everything. The entire operational plan depended on German armored spearheads reaching Meuse before American reserves could arrive. Any delay meant failure. On December 18th, von Lüttwitz's divisions were making good progress. 2nd Panzer was pushing north of Bastogne, had broken through American positions at Neuville. Panzer Lehr was approaching from the east, had cleared the villages blocking the southern route. 26th Volksgrenadier Division was following behind, securing the roads, everything on schedule. Bastogne looked vulnerable, defended by whatever scattered American units happened to be in the town. Von Lüttwitz considered sending 1 regiment to seize Bastogne, while his main forces continued west. Then on December 19th, German intelligence identified American airborne forces in Bastogne. Radio intercepts, prisoner statements, reconnaissance reports all confirmed that the American 101st Airborne Division, an elite formation, had moved into the town overnight and was establishing defensive positions. That changed everything. Airborne divisions weren't scattered rear area troops. They were elite infantry, well-trained, experienced, heavily armed. Taking Bastogne wouldn't be easy anymore. It would be a battle. Von Lüttwitz made the decision that would doom the offensive. He decided to surround Bastogne and contain the American forces while his main units pushed west. He'd deal with the town later. But bypassing it completely meant leaving a strong American force behind his lines, threatening his supply routes. So he committed forces to the siege. Forces that should have been racing west. By December 21st, von Lüttwitz realized containment wasn't working. The Americans in Bastogne were launching patrols, ambushing supply convoys, calling in artillery on German positions. They weren't contained. They were active, dangerous, and higher command was demanding results. The offensive was behind schedule. The advanced divisions were running out of fuel because supply trucks couldn't get through. Von Lüttwitz needed to take Bastogne to secure his supply lines. On December 22nd, von Lüttwitz sent a surrender demand. He thought the Americans would be rational. See, they were surrounded and outnumbered, accept honorable terms. The American response, nuts confused, and then infuriated him. It meant committing major forces to reduce Bastogne by assault, forces he needed elsewhere. December 23rd, the weather cleared. Von Lüttwitz watched American aircraft drop supplies to Bastogne, watched fighter-bombers attack his positions. His tanks, painted for summer, stood out against snow. His assembly areas were visible from the air. His supply lines were being interdicted, and he couldn't do anything about it because Germany's air force was nearly destroyed. Had nothing left to contest American air superiority. The attacks on December 25th cost von Lüttwitz his best assault division. The 15th Panzer Grenadier Division bled white against American defenses. By December 26th, when General George Patton's Third Army broke through from the south, von Lüttwitz knew Bastogne was lost. But worse, he knew the entire offensive had failed. His corps had spent 9 days fighting for one town instead of advancing west. The timetable was destroyed. The Meuse was out of reach. And now the Americans controlled Bastogne's position in his rear, cutting his supply lines, threatening everything behind him. General der Panzertruppen von Manchufel commanded 5th Panzer Army, the main strike force for the offensive. His plan required reaching the Meuse by December 19th. By December 21st, his spearhead divisions were still 40 kilometers short, bogged down around Bastogne. His supply lines were completely disrupted because Bastogne controlled a road network. Von Manchufel tried to bypass Bastogne, sending 2nd Panzer and Panzer Lehr west around the town. The 2nd Panzer Division under Colonel Meinrad von Lauchert was supposed to be the spearhead, the division that would reach the Meuse first and secure bridgeheads for the follow-on forces. Von Lauchert was an experienced commander, veteran of the Eastern Front, confident in his unit's abilities. On December 19th, his division broke through American positions north of Bastogne and raced west with over 100 operational tanks. For 3 days, the 2nd Panzer made impressive progress. They bypassed American strong points, avoided major engagements, focused on speed. By December 22nd, they covered nearly 60 kilometers. Were approaching the town of Dinant on the Meuse River. Von Lauchert could see the river valley from his command vehicle. He was within 5 kilometers of achieving the operational objective that Hitler had demanded. Then everything stopped. The division's fuel trucks, supposed to be following behind on the roads through Bastogne, never arrived. American forces in Bastogne were interdicting the supply routes, ambushing convoys, calling artillery on road junctions. The fuel that should have kept 2nd Panzer moving was burning in wrecked trucks 50 kilometers behind the front lines. On December 23rd, von Lauchert's tanks and vehicles began running out of fuel. Some units siphoned fuel from other vehicles to keep a few tanks mobile. Others just stopped where they were, waiting for supplies that never came. The division's advance, which had averaged 20 kilometers per day, dropped to 0. They sat immobile west of Bastogne, visible to American reconnaissance aircraft, targeted by fighter bombers the moment the weather cleared. On December 24th, von Lauchert received reports that American armor forces, the 2nd Armored Division and elements of the 84th Infantry Division, were moving to encircle his position. He requested permission to withdraw. Higher command refused. Hold position. Wait for supplies. Prepare to continue the attack. But the supplies never came because Bastogne controlled the roads. On December 26th, the 2nd Panzer Division spearhead, stranded near the village of Celles, without fuel, got surrounded and destroyed by American forces. Major Ernst von Kochenhausen commanded the 2nd Panzer Battle Group at Celles. He tried to break out, couldn't. Tried to hold and wait for relief. Relief never came. On December 27th, Kochenhausen abandoned his tanks and led approximately 600 men on foot through American lines. They left behind nearly all the division's remaining armor, 100 tanks, assault guns, half-tracks, all abandoned, all captured by American forces. Panzer Lehr tried to rescue 2nd Panzer, launched 2 attacks toward Celles. Both were stopped by American fighter bombers and ground forces. After the second failed rescue attempt, Panzer Lehr pulled back. The division had started the offensive with combat strength of over 15,000 men and approximately 90 tanks. By December 28, it was down to 8,000 men and fewer than 20 operational tanks, effectively destroyed as a combat unit. The 26th Volksgrenadier Division, which had spent 9 days attacking Bastogne, was exhausted and depleted. The division entered the battle with 17,000 men. By December 28th, effective strength was perhaps 7,000. Casualties from attacking fixed offenses, from air attacks, from artillery. The division could no longer conduct offensive operations, could barely defend positions it held. For German commanders, Bastogne represented a complete failure of operational planning. They'd assumed American forces would scatter and retreat when hit by a surprise offensive. Instead, the Americans concentrated at Bastogne and held. The Germans assumed they could bypass strong points and deal with them later. Instead, Bastogne controlled the critical terrain, the road network, and couldn't be bypassed. The Germans assumed weather would keep American air power grounded indefinitely. Instead, the weather cleared on December 23rd, and American air superiority destroyed German mobility. Most critically, German commanders realized too late that by surrounding Bastogne, they'd fallen into a trap. They thought they were besieging a trapped American force. Actually, they concentrated their mobile divisions around a fixed objective where the Americans could destroy them methodically with prepared defenses and air power. Every day spent at Bastogne was a day the offensive timetable slipped further behind. And once the Americans broke the siege on December 26, Bastogne became a dagger pointed at the entire German rear area. By January 1st, 1945, the Battle of Bastogne was effectively over. Though fighting continued for weeks, the Germans pulled back from immediate contact, established defensive positions at distance, tried to hold what little they gained. They'd lost strategic mobility. Their Panzer Divisions were shadows of their former strength. The offensive had failed. The accounting of German losses around Bastogne was staggering. The 2nd Panzer Division entered the battle with 120 tanks and 16,000 men. By January 5, 1945, the division reported 28 operational tanks and fewer than 8,000 effectives. Losses: 92 tanks, 8,000 casualties. Panzer Lehr entered the battle with 57 tanks and 15,000 men. By January 5th, the division had 17 operational tanks and 7,000 effectives. Losses: 40 tanks, 8,000 casualties. The 26th Volksgrenadier Division lost 10,000 of its 17,000 men around Bastogne. The 15th Panzer Grenadier Division, committed on December 25th, lost 60% of its strength in 1 week. Other units rotated to the Bastogne. Fighting suffered similar losses. The German Army Group B After Action report estimated total German casualties around Bastogne at over 20,000 killed, wounded, and missing, plus over 200 tanks and assault guns destroyed or abandoned. For the German military in the West, these losses were irreplaceable. Germany had scraped together its last reserves for the Ardennes Offensive. When those reserves were destroyed at Bastogne and elsewhere in the battle, there was nothing left. The Panzer Division's loss at Bastogne were divisions that could have defended the Rhine River, could have slowed the Allied advance into Germany. Instead, they were gone, wrecked against American defenses in a failed offensive that achieved nothing strategically. The Americans who defended Bastogne paid heavily, too, but their losses were sustainable and their victory was strategic. The 101st Airborne Division casualties from December 19, 1944 to January 6, 1945 totaled 341 killed, 1,691 wounded, 516 missing. The 10th Armored Division's Combat Command B lost approximately 500 men. Total American casualties at Bastogne, approximately 2,500. But unlike the Germans, American losses could be replaced. Reinforcements were available. Equipment losses could be made good from the massive American logistics system. And the Americans had won. They'd held Bastogne, destroyed German divisions in the process, and broken the back of Germany's last offensive in the West. Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe became famous for his one-word reply to the German surrender demand. The story of Nuts became legendary, repeated in newspapers worldwide, became a symbol of American determination. For his actions at Bastogne, he was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross by General Patton on December 30th, 1944. The citation praised his extraordinary heroism, his inspiring leadership, his continuous exposure to enemy fire while directing his troops. He was promoted to Major General on January 3rd, 1945, and given command of the 103rd Infantry Division, his first division-level infantry command. He led the 103rd through the final months of the war in Europe, crossing the Rhine River, advancing through southern Germany and Austria. His division captured Innsbruck, Austria, and reached the Brenner Pass, linking Austria and Italy. After the war, he stayed in the army, held numerous important positions. He served as chief of the Chemical Corps head of Army personnel. In 1953, he was chosen to command the 7th Army in Europe. 2 years later, he became Commander-in-Chief of United States Army Europe, one of the most important commands in the American military during the Cold War. He was promoted to 4-star general in 1955. He retired from the Army in 1956 after 38 years of service. He then worked as an executive with American Cyanamid Corporation until 1963. He also served as chairman of the New York State Civil Defense Commission from 1960 to 1963, applying his military experience in defense planning to civilian emergency preparedness. When asked about Bastogne in later years, he always said the same thing. The 101st didn't need relief. They had the Germans right where they wanted them. He understood that the siege had worked exactly as planned, that surrounding Bastogne had been the Germans' fatal mistake, not an American disaster. McAuliffe died on August 10, 1975, at age 77 from leukemia. He was buried in Arlington National Cemetery with full military honors. His wife, his son, and his daughter are buried alongside him. Lieutenant General George Patton, who broke through to relieve Bastogne, considered it one of the finest operations of his career, not because 3rd Army had rescued trapped forces, but because the 101st at Bastogne had fixed multiple German divisions in place where 3rd Army could attack them from an unexpected direction. The relief of Bastogne wasn't a rescue. It was the second phase of a deliberate operation that destroyed German offensive capability in the West. German General Otto von Manschenfeld, who commanded 5th Panzer Army, was captured in 1945 and interviewed extensively about the Ardennes Offensive. He identified Bastogne as the point where the offensive failed. The delay caused by American resistance at Bastogne destroyed the timetable. The concentration of German forces around Bastogne created a target for American artillery and air power. The loss of Panzer divisions at Bastogne destroyed the mobility necessary for the offensive to succeed. Manschenfeld concluded that surrounding Bastogne, instead of bypassing it, had been a fatal strategic mistake. Lieutenant Colonel Julian Ewell, who commanded the 501st Parachute Infantry Regiment at Bastogne, survived the battle and continued to serve. His regiment had been the first to engage the enemy east of Bastogne on December 19th, had held critical positions throughout the siege. Ewell went on to have a distinguished career, eventually rising to lieutenant general. He served in Korea and Vietnam, retired in 1973. When asked about Bastogne, he emphasized the importance of junior leaders and individual soldiers who held their positions under impossible conditions. The lessons from Bastogne influenced American military doctrine for decades. The idea that defensive positions on critical terrain can fix enemy forces and create opportunities for a counterattack became fundamental to Cold War defensive planning. The coordination of artillery, air power, and infantry in defensive operations at Bastogne became a model studied at every military school worldwide. In 1946, the Belgian government awarded the city of Bastogne the Croix de Guerre for the defense of the town. The American 101st Airborne Division received the Presidential Unit Citation, the highest unit award in the American military. The 10th Armored Division's Combat Command B also received the Presidential Unit Citation. Several streets in Bastogne were renamed for American units. The town built monuments commemorating the defense. Every December, Bastogne holds ceremonies remembering the battle. Military historians have calculated how many German divisions were effectively destroyed or rendered combat ineffective by the defense of Bastogne. The commonly cited figure is 5 divisions: 2nd Panzer Division, Panzer Lehr Division, 26th Volksgrenadier Division, 15th Panzer Grenadier Division, and elements of the 9th Panzer Division. Not all were completely destroyed, but all suffered losses that made them ineffective for offensive operations for the remainder of the war. Combined, these divisions represented roughly 50,000 men and 350 tanks at the start of the offensive. By mid-January 1945, perhaps 20,000 effectives remained with fewer than 100 operational tanks. The strategic impact of Bastogne extended beyond the immediate battle. The destruction of German armor reserves in the Ardennes meant fewer forces available to defend against the Allied advance into Germany. The Rhine crossings in March 1945 faced less opposition because the Panzer divisions that could have defended the river were gone, destroyed at Bastogne, and elsewhere in the Battle of the Bulge. The final Allied advance to the Elbe River and the link-up with Soviet forces proceeded faster because German mobile reserves had been consumed in the failed Ardennes Offensive. McAuliffe's decision to hold Bastogne and his understanding of why being surrounded was tactically advantageous rather than disastrous exemplifies a fundamental principle of warfare. The side that controls critical terrain and forces the enemy to attack prepared defenses has an enormous advantage. All the German mobility, all their armor, all their tactical skill, none of it mattered when they were forced to attack the prepared defenses at Bastogne. The Americans picked the ground, prepared the defenses, and destroyed every German attack systematically. That's the real lesson of Bastogne. American forces didn't let Germans trap them. They invited the Germans to concentrate forces around a town the Americans had fortified, and then they destroyed those forces systematically with artillery, air power, and infantry fighting from prepared positions. The Germans thought they were besieging Bastogne. Actually, Bastogne was besieging them, fixing them in place where American firepower could destroy them. The trap worked backward, and by the time the Germans realized it, they'd lost equivalent of 5 divisions and any chance of reaching their objective. If you found this story as compelling as we did, please take a moment to like this video. It helps us share more forgotten stories from the Second World War. Subscribe to stay connected with these untold histories. Each one matters. Each one deserves to be remembered. And we'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below telling us where you're watching from. Our community spans from Texas to Tasmania. From veterans to history enthusiasts, you're part of something special here. Thank you for watching, and thank you for keeping these stories alive.